It's not very common in Hollywood to have a sequel within 6 months of a movie, but Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later gets a follow-up sooner than expected. Now, the first trailer for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, has just dropped, and the early signs are promising enough as the next chapter in the story. The movie is directed by Nia DaCosta, whose earlier works include Candyman and The Marvels, and the trailer offers some exciting prospects as the post-apocalyptic saga continues. In this video, I'll break down the trailer for you, with all the little details and Easter eggs, so that you know what to expect when the movie finally hits the theaters in January next year. How does the ending of 28 Years Later set up the Bone Temple as a continuation of the story? I thought that before heading into the details of the trailer, a quick recap about the events of the movie 28 Years Later and the ending sequence should help with some perspective. For those who don't remember, the movie explored the horrors of the aftermath of the outbreak and featured a 12-year-old boy named Spike who lived on the isolated and quarantined Holy Island with his parents. After discovering his father's infidelity and witnessing the worsening condition of his mother, Isla, he left the safety of the island to seek help. Spike and Isla experienced various threats, including the rage virus carriers and hostile survivors, and they even rescued a seemingly uninfected baby girl born from a pregnant infected woman. They also met Dr. Ian Kelson, a reclusive and mysterious figure who constructed a monument called the Bone Temple, made up of human bones and skulls as a memento to remember the dead. Isla was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she was helped with assisted euthanasia to end her misery. Spike was disillusioned after the death of his mother, and he left the baby girl back at Holy Island with a note for his father before venturing back to the mainland alone. The movie ended with the unexpected entry of Jimmy and his group as they helped Spike survive an attack from a horde of rage-infected. From the looks of it, Jimmy and his group seemed to belong to some kind of cult, and he offered Spike a place within his gang. Now, 28 years later, the Bone Temple will probably trace the aftermath of this union, as well as the fate of Dr. Kelson and his Bone Temple, along with the fate of humanity. Let's quickly check out the details of the trailer to understand all the plot points that can be explored in this movie. The Bone Temple seems to have a major role in the movie. Well, I'm no Einstein for figuring this out, because it literally says so in the movie title. But the trailer confirms the guesses about the importance of the titular Bone Temple and Dr. Ian Kelson in the plot. The trailer opens with a shot of the Bone Temple, and there's an ominous touch about the sequence that you might just find a bit disturbing. The scene in the trailer that shows crows flying overhead the Bone Temple might indicate a horde of infected approaching, because we've seen in the earlier movie that crows usually follow the infected for a free feast, and they serve as a nice little warning sign. There's the scene where the Bone Temple is set on fire, and whether Dr. Kelson did it himself to ward off someone or it's the doing of the Jimmy Gang, we have to wait and find out. And the bottom line is that the Bone Temple symbolized the preservation of human memory and history, and now that it's gone, something major must have happened. I'll dwell on this later on in this video. Can we get a detailed origin story of Dr. Kelson? Even within the short time period of the trailer, Dr. Kelson features quite a few times, which is probably a clear giveaway that he'll be an integral part of the story. The trailer shows the life of solitude that Dr. Kelson has to endure, and he's always been alone, even from the events of 28 years later. The earlier movie talked about how crazy he used to be, but the trailer humanizes the character further, even though the climactic moments of 28 years later did that already. We now see that he had a family, and there are pictures of his loved ones on the wall, along with a small collection of his favorite books. There's a book on herbal medicine, and there are books on potential sources of food, so maybe he just kept the books that are handy and useful in this hostile world. It's not an easy task to avoid losing your mind when there's absolutely nobody to interact with, and Dr. Kelson seems to have dealt with that pretty well so far. I wouldn't be surprised if the movie reveals that some of the characters that we've already seen or known are associated with Dr. Kelson in some way. Also, from the trailer, it seems like Dr. Kelson has found a way to generate some electricity for himself, although I'm not too sure about how he achieved that. He could have used water or solar energy by some means to generate electricity for his modest living. The use of the gramophone is a clever moment to suggest that Dr. Kelson still has his senses intact, and he's surely up to something, especially with Samson, the rage virus-infected alpha from the earlier movie. He lives within a network of tunnels in what looks like an underground World War II bunker, where he has all the pictures and books. I'm quite certain that the upcoming movie will reveal a lot more about Dr. Kelson, his backstory and his plan, now that he's caught up in the middle of nowhere with a hostile infected individual at his doorstep. What's the deal between Samson and Dr. Kelson? For me, one of the most intriguing moments from 28 years later was when Samson was brought to the fore as one of the alpha virus carriers. He was smarter and more powerful than the other infected, but more importantly, he seemed to have a somewhat human-like consciousness, going by the way he desperately wanted the baby girl back. In the trailer, Samson is back, and this time he has a cloth around his waist, which is great because I love keeping some things to imagination. Also, it makes sense because Dr. Kelson probably drugged him and got him dressed up because he has something on his mind. Does he wish to experiment on Samson? Well, it might be quite likely, and he might have done something to have him subdued. How else do you explain the scene in the trailer where he extends his arm to touch Samson and there are no signs of violence? Of course, one can never forget how dangerous Samson can be. And if it is actually an experiment on him, Dr. Kelson better get it right because one mistake will ruin it for him. I'm also not very sure about the implication of the scene where Samson and Dr. Kelson seem to be in a standoff, standing about 100 meters from each other. Overall, I think that Samson might hold the key to the future of humanity because he might be helpful in understanding the rage virus better. Also, I see a complicated and twisted relationship between Dr. Ian Kelson and Samson, and I don't rule out the possibility that the two of them have some past connection somehow. What is the importance of the train sequence? There is a hint in the trailer that the movie will go back to the 2002 timeline for some parts of the story. There are set pieces from the first film, but most importantly, the train sequence is a grim reminder of how things used to be before everything went haywire. It shows a train traveling peacefully, and clearly it's before the outbreak. To match up with the realistic part of the story, we then see the ruins of the train, and there's someone inside foraging through the ruins. This might be Dr. Kelson, but there's no confirmation on that. But surely the movie will look back at the time before the outbreak changed everything, and this might be a great opportunity to understand the rage virus infection from the perspective of some other people. We also see the train later in the trailer video as a perfect before and after, and it looks like some people have been killed inside the ruins. Maybe they were just seeking shelter from something and got attacked by the infected, or maybe the Jimmy Gang had something to do with it, which brings me to my next major point from the trailer. The trailer focuses quite a bit on Jimmy and his cult. Even though Jimmy and his cult only appeared at the end of 28 years later, there were clear indications that they'd be an integral part of the story going ahead. And the trailer has just confirmed that. We see plenty of shots featuring Jimmy, and all his cult members have the upside-down cross marked on their head. Also, it's worth noticing that Jimmy strikes the infamous Baphomet pose in the trailer, which further highlights his anti-Christ school of thought. And from the looks of it in the trailer, they're up to no good. They're seen raiding and looting. And there's a scene in the trailer that possibly gives us a glimpse of the upside-down infected from the last film. Also, there's a hostile takeover, where people are tied up and the Jimmy Gang seems to be mutilating them, including carving the name Jimmy on their bodies. Now that Spike's a member of the gang, he'll probably find out about the dark side of their practices. I'd love to find out more about the origin of this cult and how Jimmy went from being a survivor as a kid to transforming into the leader of this cult. What his motivations and aspirations are will also reveal more about the future course of the narrative. Everyone is still stuck in the past. I've noticed in the trailer that things are still in the past, as was the case in the earlier movie. There's a scene where we get a closer look at Dr. Kelson's collection of books, and one of the books that he has there is Gray's Anatomy, which is one of the earliest books of human anatomy and medicine. Also, there's a scene with Queen Elizabeth's picture on the wall from the 50s, and the gramophone and BBC references in the trailer also point to the fact that people really have remained stuck back in time in the absence of modern technology. Is the Jimmy Gang the main antagonist in the movie? Jimmy Crystal, who was first introduced at the end of 28 years later, will play a major role in the Bone Temple, and the character played by Jack O'Connell has been modeled after Jimmy Savile. Everything from his blonde hair and tracksuit to the flashy gold jewelry remind you of the real-life Jimmy Savile, a notable British TV personality who was posthumously revealed to have a sinister past. He was accused of sexual abuse with victims ranging in the hundreds, and Danny Boyle confirmed that Jimmy Crystal was inspired by Savile in order to blend a pop culture reference with the darker reality. Now, given the timeline of the group in the movie narrative, the dark secret of Jimmy Savile was probably not out yet, and he was still regarded as a national treasure when Jimmy Crystal started to idolize him. But it was clear that young Spike joining the group was not his finest decision. I've already spoken about the violent acts of the gang, and there's a scene in the trailer which suggests that they could have forcibly shaved off Spike's hair to turn him into one of them. Also, there's a good chance that Spike decides to escape, because we have a moment in the trailer that looks like Spike has been tracked down as he struggles to free himself to being pinned down to the ground. I'm also curious about the fate of Holy Island and whether we'll see the island invaded by Jimmy and his cult members. There are some scenes with them chilling inside a house and sharing a meal, and the interior decors remind me of the houses we saw in the earlier movie as Spike was growing up. Of course, there's a crucial giveaway in the trailer, where we see one of the cult members spying on Dr. Kelson, and this is probably the confirmation that Jimmy and his followers will have a face-off against the lone wolf. There's even a scene where Jimmy walks through the Bone Temple at night, and given the psychopathic nature of this character, I don't see this sequence with a happy ending. Also, the trailer features the Jimmy Gang members sporting strange masks, and nothing about their mannerisms or actions seem normal or regular. Everything in the trailer points to the possibility of the Jimmy Gang being the main antagonist in the movie. Unless, of course, there's a twist somehow, and they end up changing for the better as a new villain pops up somewhere. Will the Bone Temple be destroyed? Is this the end of the road for Dr. Kelson? Yes, it'll break my heart to see Dr. Kelson played by the versatile Ralph Fiennes perish, but there might be something on these lines in store for the fans. Well, to start things off, the trailer shows an image of the Bone Temple, and there are hundreds of ravens or crows flying overhead. Going by the history of the franchise, ravens are not usually a great sign, and they might symbolize the ominous fate of the Bone Temple. Dr. Kelson has lived life like a pro against all odds, but he might have his hands full with the infected and the Jimmy Gang after him. Also, if Spike does escape from the Jimmy Gang, there is a chance that Dr. Kelson will try to save him, which will put him against the ferocious cult members. There's a powerful sequence in the trailer that shows the Bone Temple on fire, although it's not clear if Dr. Kelson set it on fire or if it was the doing of the Jimmy Gang. There's also a scene in the trailer that shows Dr. Kelson slightly disoriented, which has me worried that he might be infected by the Rage virus. A fan theory is doing the rounds, suggesting that Dr. Kelson will voluntarily get infected in order to fight the Jimmy Gang and protect Spike. But I think that we're building castles in the air at this point. That being said, I don't rule out the possibility that Dr. Kelson might sacrifice himself in some way to protect Spike or the potential future of humanity if he comes up with a cure of some kind. There are plenty of instances in the trailer that hint at a proper showdown between the two sides. And let's not forget the movie is the second in line of the trilogy, and the third movie will actually close things off properly. This means that the death of someone like Dr. Kelson might be the perfect motivation for Spike, who already admires him. And the final movie in the trilogy will set up the fight for revenge. Jimmy and his gang are still out there preying on the innocent. Of course, there's also the possibility that Dr. Kelson will watch his Bone Temple destroyed. He'll team up with the likes of Spike and others oppressed by the Jimmy Gang to fight back. Whatever it may be, I'm just excited to see a lot more of Ralph Fiennes in the movie, and it's already a win for me if it comes with a heartbreak at the end. Who is the mysterious recurring woman in the trailer? It seems like we have a recurring new character, a woman who's seen multiple times across the trailer. She seems to be caught between the dangerous factions and the dangers of the hostile world. There's a scene that shows her running through forested areas. Now, these might be the forests of Holy Island, but there's no telling for sure. It looks like she's running from something and trying to avoid capture. She also interacts with the Jimmy cult, and there's a scene in the trailer that shows her interacting with them as they're performing brutal rituals and executions. She's probably someone who just wants to survive, and currently the Jimmy Gang suits her best. She'll likely try to escape at some point, which adds to the tension. She might even team up with Spike when he decides to leave the group. Does Spike open up the doors to Holy Island for the Jimmy Gang? Now, the trailer doesn't reveal this, but the looks of it suggest that there is a time when Spike really starts to be indoctrinated into the cult. He's sporting a blonde wig after he gets his head shaved off, and they're sharing a meal together. He might be disillusioned, and I'm not sure what to make of the scene where Spike seems to protect some people or something with a bow and arrow. Maybe he's yet to make a decision about quitting the group because he still has the blonde wig in this scene. If he does invite cultists to the island, then I'm concerned about the well-being of the islanders, given the nature of Jimmy. Also, it'll be interesting to find out what becomes of Spike's father, who seemed desperate to reunite with his son in the earlier movie, but there are no clear signs of him in the trailer. You have to wait till the movie releases to see Cillian Murphy. Everyone was excited to learn about the inclusion of Cillian Murphy in the movie, but the trailer shows no signs of him yet. The Peaky Blinders star marks his return to the franchise as Jim from the 2002 original film 28 Days Later. But while his return has been confirmed, we're yet to know how the story will reintroduce him. Since he doesn't appear in the trailer, his return remains shrouded in mystery, and you'll probably have to wait till the movie releases to see the rest of his story arc. However, Danny Boyle did reveal during an interview that his return will be very satisfying for the fans. If I have to guess, I'll put my money on the chance of him appearing in an impactful cameo, and maybe the final film in the trilogy will make proper use of his character. Marvelous verdict. This will be a trilogy to remember. If 28 years later impressed you, there's a chance that the Bone Temple will take things up a notch with perfect continuation of the storyline. The familiar faces from the last movie are all part of the narrative, and their fate will determine the course of the third and final film in the trilogy. If it's all handled properly, I can promise you that this will be among the best horror drama trilogies in the last decade, and the franchise surely has the right actors and directors to make it all happen. The trailer of 28 years later, The Bone Temple, is short but mighty and eventful, and it'll just be a wait of a few more months before we get to see the movie in the theaters and have all our answers. Do let me know in the comments below what you think of the exciting new trailer. Feel free to share your views on the future course of the narrative for the upcoming movie.